Hello and welcome to Scale by Design. Today we're joined by Sasanka, the founder and CEO of LaunchSource. Sasanka, welcome to the show.
Hey man, how's it going? Sasanka Atapattu. I am the founder and CEO of LaunchSource. It is founded in Boston. Now we're in the remote world. We're all over the place, national. LaunchSource is quickly growing and becoming the number one GTM hiring marketplace to build and scale the most diverse sales team. So we're certainly solving a big problem in tech, but it's a problem that we see in a lot of industries. My background, as you know, and several others, I've spent the last close to 20 years in sales strategy and consulting in industries like big pharma, market research, and now tech, which makes me feel a little bit younger. But yes, I have close to 20 years of experience. Um, Passions of mine. Well, James, you've been out with me, so you know I love food, drinks, good times. But I am a dad. I've got two beautiful daughters, 7'5", and a little boy, Bodhi Hart Adapadu. And I love being around water in the summer. So I've been fortunate to be up in Maine this summer, hanging out on the beach, but also on the lake. And these days, I'm reading to be a better CEO, being a better leader, and learning, as we go in an interesting time in the world, right? With the great attrition, with wars, with tensions in our country, but still, I think there's a lot of cool stuff happening, both opportunity in the world, but what we're here to talk about, like startups and stuff we talk about here and offline.
For sure, man. And before we hit record, like one of the things we said we wanted to talk about was just like high level recruiting cycles, like what we're seeing right now in the market. I want to riff back and forth, right? Like I'll share with you kind of what I'm seeing and what's happening, and curious to get your thoughts on what's happening in the market right now, specifically as it pertains to talent acquisition. What are you seeing out there? What trends are you seeing, and how do you think? What are you kind of expecting to happen over the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, I mean, so again, just to set the context, the segment that I'm most familiar with right now and that we work with is tech, both startups, I would say pre-Series A, up to IPO. And we see both growth and we see both consolidation or cuts or cost cutting. And I think in some cases we see companies cut where they're obviously overcapitalized, where we've seen a lot of hiring in the past, and this is where companies are really taking a more disciplined approach. And I think the market's saying, "Oh my God, what's happening?" But it's more disciplined. Now, I've come from, as I mentioned, a different industry, pharma, where we were very used to this and immune to a little bit more discipline. I think in other instances, you see larger companies that are laying off, and it's more disciplined in terms of cutting those costs. And so, from a recruiting standpoint, people are still hiring. I think what we're seeing, at least from our standpoint, we're on the GTM side, and specifically in entry and early career sales and volume hiring. We're seeing more applicants, more flooded, and we're seeing TA and recruiters be more stressed in that process, and inundated with a lot more applicants. And we're seeing business units, not just in sales, although that's our core expertise, but I was talking to a talent lead at Amazon, and he's facing these same problems in engineering and R for R, recruiting recruiters. So we're seeing that piece there. So I think it's going to have a big effect over the 3 to 6 months in terms of hiring great talent. I do think the layoffs are going to continue throughout the rest of the year, which means that we're going to have to really rethink from a talent acquisition and recruiting side, how to be more efficient, and then from a candidate perspective, how to be ready and prepared, right? For anything. both internal mobility, but also if it's your time, or there's a shift in your organization, what are you going to do?
For sure, for sure. And I think well, what you said is very interesting that you think layoffs are going to continue for the rest of the year. So actually I have a similar kind of philosophy or thought process surrounding what's happening right now. I think, and this isn't like, I think I've heard this too on, Wall Street Journal, stuff like that. That this is, it's kind of like a slower contraction, right?
Correct.
And we don't really know where bottom is yet, but I am pretty confident it's not going to be anywhere near what it was in 2020. And
Right.
so, but it's just taking a little bit longer. Like in COVID times, right? It was like 2 weeks, like boom, 90% of demand plummeted, right? It was pretty nuts. And then within like 3 to 6 months, we were already rebounding.
Right.
I think this is going to be slower, right? It's like taking longer for the correction to kind of kick in. And I think it's going to take a little bit longer to come out of it as well. So I think that's kind of likely. I don't know exactly the timeline. Like from my perspective, I don't know if layoffs are going to be occurring for the next 3 months, 6 months, but it's what's kind of nice about it, I guess, is that like there's time to react, right? Like we have time to be strategic about how this is impacting our businesses versus in COVID, we're just like, WTF, like this just happened so fast. And now we just have to do a complete overhaul on everything to get through to the other end of this, right?
Well, yeah, but to be clear, so this is really, really important to think about. When I say layoffs are going to continue to happen, maybe I need to rephrase. Restructuring of organizations are going to continue to happen. So what that means is companies are really rethinking about, do I need this department and seven different functions, right? So they may reinvest in in other parts of the organizations, right? So what we're seeing in our own business is, hey, they laid off SDRs in one department, but they're still utilizing our platform in another area, right? So that's really interesting, right? And they're actually speaking to us about their hiring plans in Q4 and Q1 of next year, right? So because the cost grids are there. So I think when you think about, if from a candidate perspective, you've got to think about, hey, if you're an early career individual, do I have the skills, or am I thinking the right way about my career? If you're in the company, am I efficient? Do I have the resource? If I'm ahead of talent, am I adaptable for this change, right? So companies are still going to hire, to be clear, but it is going to change, meaning even in my organization, my planning and what I was going to hire for Q3 and Q4 is different now than it was 2 months ago.
For sure, for sure. And I think quite honestly, I think people in our industry are the ones going to be the stand to benefit from a lot of market volatility. Like I'm very bullish on talent acquisition products and services at this point in time, just in terms of just being able to maintain double digit growth as an industry. Everything from RPO to products probably faster than double digit, at least that, at some point as we start to rebound, I think a lot of these platforms are going to be taking off. Because the more volatility there is, the more people start to rethink cost centers, right? And talent acquisition is a cost center. It's an expense for companies to continuously have that in the budget. And I think a lot of firms are going to start to think about, like, what are the core strategic functions within our business, right? You have go to market, you have product, and what functions, what cost centers can we start to outsource in a quality way, to help maybe even accelerate results in a way that we can't do in house, but that is also fluid and flexible, that we can kind of scale up or down based on our demands. And so I think that the companies that are going to thrive in the future are the ones that have that flexibility and can scale up or down with a company based on demand. And it's from a business perspective, being a CEO of a company like that's servicing that, like, I think some people are a little bit scared of saying, like, oh, we want to be that on-demand provider because they're worried about revenue fluctuations. But the reality is, like, you just have to make sure that's baked into the pricing, where you can absorb some of those hits and be flexible with your own cost structure. But that's really where I see the opportunities, like flexibility, being able to scale quickly, right, up and down, and replacing to a large extent like internal call centers. And I think like companies of the future, they're probably going to, you know, have very lean internal talent acquisition teams. And I think that that's going to start to push up into more of an enterprise model as well. And they're going to be leveraging, you know, external partners more and more to kind of fulfill some of those call center functions versus having like big bloated P&Ls of, you know, fixed costs that are long term, right?
Well, two things, right? And I've known you for a while. I'm pretty disappointed. One thing that you just said, right? And for your followers, hopefully it's hopeful, right? Which is you just said talent acquisition, being a cost center, right? And as a CEO, I've had to learn this, right? And what we do know is talent is the most important thing of a goddamn organization, right? Not the tech, not the drug, right? All the things. I've worked in 3 different industries, mega industries, right? And we continue to say things like talent is a cost center. There's AI for sales, there's all these things that we can do, and the skill gaps and the lack of jobs is going to cost the global economy $1.8 trillion by 2030. 1.8 trillion. And you're saying it's a cost center.
Okay, I see what you're saying, but I think like what I'm referring to is like CFOs, right? Like when people are looking at
So
the budget,
CFOs
they're going to see it as a cost center.
are right now, my CFO is thinking about ramp. He is thinking about flexibility. You're right. I think you guys have a great flexible model that if you think about what I just said, right? The leaders in TA that are being progressive, and I know a few of them, right, that are partners to the CEOs of the best organizations are adaptable. They're using innovative technologies like LaunchSource. They're able to say, you know what, I know this is coming. I'm going to use an adaptable solution that's flexible so that we're about to lay off. But I know Q1 of 2023 and 2020, right? We have to hit that number because pipeline isn't going to change. Our revenue goals, we have duties to our shareholders, right? So whether you're a startup that's raised money, you have your duty to your board and so forth, or you're a publicly traded company. And so you're 100% right, which is this is what I mean, right? Recessions and things of this nature and words like this create more opportunity for people that want it. And when we look at fields like talent acquisition, it excites me because, hey, if you're in recruiting or talent acquisition, I think for so long they've been left behind, but now it's a great opportunity to say, hey, you've got solutions like you guys, Secure Vision and others that are on the forefront of being a great tool to move forward.
For sure. And so one of the other things we wanted to talk about is just attrition in general, right? Like there's a lot of ways we could tackle this conversation, but obviously average tenures are declining. People are leaving jobs faster than ever before. That's a big trend, and that's probably not going anywhere. Then we have, I think you mentioned like, would you say like 40% of people right now are considering other opportunities?
Yep.
So how does that impact, from your perspective, talent acquisition? How does it impact just organizations in general? How are you thinking about, I don't know if you consider it a problem or an opportunity, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
So, I mean, there's a couple ways to tackle that, right? We tackle that in one area, but I think an area we don't tackle that companies really should think about is the employee experience, right? If I'm one of the things as a founder CEO that I'm really thinking about is, we're a remote culture, but what keeps me up at night is being a remote culture, you get the opportunity to work with a lot of different types of people and hire people over the world. Um, but then it's your responsibility as a CEO or a founder or a leader to recognize that you need to learn about that person's experience, right, wherever they are in the world, and make sure that you're doing everything right to create a great experience for that person. And today, I would argue, this is a broad statement, that we're all failing, right? Because we're new at this, right? Because there's different generations and segments and so forth. And we haven't figured out the right formula, right? There's, I think, a motion of hybrid and so forth. So I think that's number one, is if 40% of people are really looking, right? I think that's number one. I think number two is build your safety net. What is your safety net? What's your plan? And I don't know how you think about that, but or what you're hearing from your partners or your customers, but is it, having an adaptable solution? Is it having a platform? Is it having predictable access? Is it, building partnerships with organizations, nonprofits that whether that's in engineering and so forth. So those are the things that you got to think about.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
what
I
do you,
think it's more important than ever. Like, you have to have proactive solutions in place for talent acquisition. Like, I probably sound like a broken record saying this, but I say it all the time. It's like the best companies, category leaders, companies that are up and coming, they do not view talent acquisition as this transactional light switch they can just flip on and
correct,
off. Like, they're
correct.
constantly optimizing, just like a revenue org would or product org would. I mean, they're data driven, they're proactive, they're investing in a lot of different things tied to talent acquisition, like without getting into all of them, they're just high level, like they're investing in it proactively. And I think part of that is particularly for scale positions, right? Like, you have to not only optimize the entire TA org, but figure out, okay, over the next 3 to 5 years, what positions are we going to be hiring for at scale, and also specifically optimize for that. So everything from candidate flow to candidate experience to growth opportunities, employment packages, right? All of that stuff has to be defined first and foremost for the scale roles. And you have to have the right solutions in place so that, when the market rebounds, you're actually in a position to where you can take advantage of the full wave of that recovery. That's the companies that, the way I look at, for instance, coming out of this, whatever this is, whatever the like recession,
Sure,
whatever you want to call
sure,
it,
sure.
this is our chance to become the category leader,
Right.
right? Like, because if we have the right resources in place now, we're going to ride that full wave of recovery and we're going to take over. Like, that's kind of how I see it. So I'm less concerned with attrition. I am investing in providing great experiences for employees,
Yep.
but I also don't care if somebody stays here for a year or 3 years. Stay here as long as you want to. I will do my best to create the best opportunity for you. I want you to be better off as a result of having worked here. And, Steve Cadigan, he's the first chief HR officer of LinkedIn. And I brought him onto my other podcast, Talent Acquisition Trends and Strategy. And he's a very, very sharp guy. He was, head of HR for EA and a lot of other great companies, probably board director of like 20 firms, right? And he says, like, people are trying to solve the wrong problem. They're trying to like swim up current and try to fight a trend that is tenures are declining. And he said, whether you like it or not, it's silly to fight that, right? Like, that's already happening. And most people don't think that's going to change. What if we flip the script and we start to focus on how can we accelerate onboarding and ramp so that employees can begin adding value faster? Like, how do we get clear on role descriptions? Like, the top 3 things that people have to do. How do we create better L&D, enablement, process, tech? Says when you focus on that problem, if you will, that's the one that's worth solving, because then you can plug people in and out a lot faster. And he also says, like, people undervalue the creativity and energy that new employees bring to the table. Like, the reality is that when new people are joining your org at a faster rate, they're coming from different environments, right? Different companies with different challenges that have different perspectives on solving problems, and they can bring that value to your company. So, one of the example he gave is like when he was scaling LinkedIn from like 300 to 3,000 people, the average tenure was like 9 months. Like,
So
they like industry leading, category leading, like just crushing it, obviously. So, I mean, I'm not saying that like we should not strive to create great experiences or to prolong, like we should, but I'm also less concerned. I don't try to fight that current. I just kind of lean into it and figure out how do we make the most of it, basically.
yeah, I will back you 100% on that, right? I think listen, as an organization, I've lived this, right? LaunchSource in itself has gone through 4 or 5 teams. I mean, I just presented to my team. We're in LaunchSource 4.0. I've had to reinvent myself, right? And for the first time in our history, we've have an install base of leadership, and I've had to really rethink, right? And that's the toughest thing as a leader and as a CEO that I've had to do, right? And you're right. There's a book, Alliances of I can't remember, but it's by Reid Hoffman by LinkedIn. He talks about tours of duty at LinkedIn, and And the reality does become where there just aren't rules, right, for everybody at each step of the journey. And the theory is, what if you do create this great experience during that short time and not fight attrition, right? Um, but it doesn't mean, right, still, and I agree with you on that, is we still should strive to create the best employee experiences, and it'll shake out in one of the two ways, right? Which is, you're right, we don't have to fight, people leaving, but at the end of the day, we're going to be left with great employee experiences. And people will come in and we can still work on the L&D process and so forth. We'll just have a better system where, hey, if I can get more people in and out of the system saying I had a great LaunchSource experience internally and I left my mark, I have a one slide that I show everybody that has like 40 people on it and says, leave your mark. Um, I'm a happy person, right? I'm a happy leader.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's let's accelerate onboarding ramp.
Right.
Let's
Hiring
like
the right
yeah,
people,
like
hiring
the
the right people.
right, like the metric
Trying
should
to.
be like, are they adding value and is the company better off as a result of their work?
Sure.
Are the clients happy? Is
Sure.
whatever it like that matters. What doesn't matter is necessarily, I mean, you could have somebody who's with you for 5 years underperforming. Is that really a value add that they're, you know what I mean? Like it just should be less focused on time and more focused on progress, results, outcomes, that kind of stuff, you know?
Sure. Sure.
Um,
Sure. The
yeah.
question is, how many companies think that way, and are they set up, right, to think that way, right? And at the large organization, right? Because you're really shifting toward, and you're right, it is a trend. We don't see people. I mean, if you see my LinkedIn, I was at an organization for 7 years, right?
Yeah.
A big, big corporation, right? And so you don't see that as much anymore. Um, and so our company is going to change, and our employees, but it's an interesting argument.
Yeah, it is. I mean, again, it's just like philosophically, how do people view talent? Like, what's their people philosophy? Like you touched on this earlier. It's like, basically what you said is like people are the primary driver of value, right? Like that's what's going to allow you to, having the best possible team is going to have an exponential impact on the growth and value that you can provide, right? So it's just how do people see it? Do they view, again, like talent acquisition as kind of this transactional thing where the cost center that they just cut down on and add back and cut down, and I think the majority of companies out there see it that way, and then there's a small percentage of companies that are just like proactively investing. And my thoughts are that that's probably not going to change. I don't like educating people just doesn't work very well, right? I mean, people have their kind of philosophies going into business. Like some companies, CEOs or leaders are product focused, other are sales focused. Very few of them come from a talent background, right? Like they're usually like the sales fundraising type that's charismatic, or they're like the product engineering type. They're like, how often do you get a CEO that's like, comes from people
Right.
organizations, right? Like you do occasionally, but generally speaking, you don't, right? So that's like they're not, people have a tendency, right, to like oversimplify things that aren't in their lane. And we see that a lot as I think an issue for talent. So like for instance, like from a client strategy, I really just try to stay away from the companies where it's like a hard sell, where I have to convince them and educate them, because I just know there's going to be friction in that relationship. They're going to hire us as the experts, but then they're not going to like let us make the decisions we need to make to drive results. And we've really just everything from our marketing to our positioning, our like our in terms of how we, I guess, like talk about our value proposition. Everything is trying to just speak to the customers, the companies that already see talent acquisition the way we do, versus trying to convince people to see things the way that we do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and I empathize with you as a GTM person, right? And being somebody in sales, and having spoken to thousands of sales leaders at this point in research, and working with them in LaunchSource. And now I'm new to the talent world, right? And I have been honored and welcomed by talent leaders that have literally I've been humbled, right, by that world. And what I've seen is chaos, right? Which is, what we meaning on the GTM side want is efficiency, right? And we want people and we want pipeline and we want sales, but we don't, and what talent is always trying to provide is efficiency, process, and things of that nature, but it's disconnected and disjointed. So arguably, right, I think that hard sell, man, it's I think it's worth it for just the bigger picture sometimes, right? Of transforming the organization, because some of the work that we do isn't just about integrating a platform now, we're transforming an entire org, right? We're bridging the gap between the sales or marketing organization and talent teams of some of the largest tech companies. And that's kind of cool, right? And that's what you're doing too, but that process is broken. I'm really rethinking talent. Talent is never, even when I think about my financial model, it's kind of a line item. But then I look at all the people I have to hire like next year, and then the people after that, and all the mistakes I just made in hiring. And I'm like, I don't even know these people. And I'm calling my friends in talent. I'm like, is this an account manager or technical? And then they're explaining it to me. My VP of sales isn't explaining that to me. So that's the type of stuff that now I'm learning. And I think, at 6, 7 years in, right, as a founder CEO, and imagine executives that don't have that knowledge, how much they're missing.
Yeah, they're missing and they don't even realize it. That's the annoying part. There's nothing more like annoying than like a leader or a hiring manager that just doesn't know like really anything about how to hire the right people, but they like think they know everything about it, which you find a lot of that in talent acquisition.
That's
Like an obnoxious amount of that.
that's transparently me for the first 4 years. I just had to pay for it, right?
Yeah, you
Like
learn the hard way. That's
I literally had to recruit talent people that now are friendly to me that were my clients that are like, what are you doing? Like you're burning your own cash, right? Like this is the type of person you hire. This is the profile. I'm like, how'd you know? They're like, we're talent people. Like, oh, right.
right, right. Oh, this. Yeah, this is a whole thing.
Versus you have to write a job, then you have to tweak it. Okay, now you hire. Now, how are they performing? Then they call out, like, how are they performing, right? Like, so there's a lot more strategic value. And, but I think, unlike GT salespeople, right, that are loud, I think talent folks don't do that. And I think it will change. I really do, because think about what we've just been talking about, right? If we are saying layoffs are going to continue and people are still hiring, we're going to need the support of talent. It is going to be more critical than ever to be able to identify the roles. And then if 40% of people are looking to transition from one industry to another, and people like myself are saying, oh, that person's great. Like we're going to hire the wrong people, put them in the wrong roles. It's going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, yeah, and it's things are going to move faster. So it's like without the right process tech,
Right.
everything in place, like there's more opportunities to screw up. Um, yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. And hey, look, I kind of want to zoom out for a minute because we have a little bit of time left, like
Sure.
about 10 more minutes. Yeah, let's talk about. I want to hear like your just as an entrepreneur, founder, CEO. Talk to me about like the scale that you want to achieve, like how you think about scale, taking your business to the next level, how to go about doing that, like where your head's at in terms of like when you're thinking about solving that puzzle, like what are the big what do you see as like kind of the big growth levers from a scale perspective to take LaunchSource to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, it's about decisions, right? At each step of the process, and the decisions get harder because there are things at each stage. When you start a company, right, you have more flexibility and less customers. You have more flexibility to do what you want and say you're going to do many, many things or be as big as you want. But then you get a customer and you have to deliver for that customer. It's your obligation, right? And you need to be successful for that customer to get your second customer, right? And then you get your second customer, and you have to be successful, and it's your obligation. But that's how you get more customers. Then we've worked with hundreds now, right? And now we have a base of customers. But in our story, what we think about are not all customers are equal at our stage. So we have to think about repeatability and scalability, right? At our next stage, which customers, which levers, right, can we get to um, the next tranche, right? The next million, right? The next set of customers. And there's kind of two levers, right? It's speed, meaning there's a certain segment of customers for us that we can probably get faster, a smaller deal size, and or there's a second segment of customers that we really like, we're comfortable with, we've had success with lately that take a little bit longer. We're going to have to build some more product around, but they're scaling faster, meaning their average spend is 3 to 4 times what I had originally hypothesized,
That's
right?
great.
And so what I think about is how quickly do I get to 100 million, right? And so can I get there in 3 years, right? So
You're talking about annually recurring revenue, or like what's
annual
your
recurring
okay?
revenue, right? And how do I do that within the new boundaries of SaaS, right? Within the CAC rate, within your margins around 70%, within an expanding 30% net retention, and really having a burn ratio that's pretty tight, right? That eventually hits essentially 1 to 1. What Sam Jacobs, what people are talking about is scaling properly, which is challenging because you have to pick the right partners, you have to pick the right clients, right? You have to build the right products at the certain stages of the company in order to do that, right? So those are the levers that I think about at this stage of the company.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like when I think about scale right now, and yeah, I mean what you were saying, like yeah, Sam Jacobs had a great post recently where he was talking about like what scale is and isn't, right?
Right.
And he's talking about like CAC and LTV and things like those things should be scaling. Like scale is not raising money and then hiring a ton of people,
Correct.
but then your revenue is not increasing or your CAC
Correct.
just gets totally distorted or like that you have to you should be looking at a lot of core metrics and those need to be scaling the way that they should be to really truly like that successful scale, right? Successful scale is not raising money, hiring a ton of people, and then laying them off 3 months later.
Uh,
Like that's not.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, and I predominantly had to bootstrap and put my own money into this company, right? And I've gone through a lot of pain, in as you and many people have in building companies, right? This was not VC funded and so forth. And doing that, you learn that because I can't just hire people, right? Because you don't have the funds to do so or anyone and so forth. Now, I've had a lot of great people that have come through here, but I think you're in the sort of, you've been in the similar boat where you've had to hire within means. And so I think there's a generation of entrepreneurs are thinking scale differently. Sam Jacobs is in that same boat. We all kind of look up and see him doing this and talking about it. And it's going to be a fun ride in comparing notes each step of the way. The question is, who can do this more efficiently, quickly, right? Because sometimes this takes a little bit longer, right, when you're doing it that way.
For sure. And that's actually for scale too. Like the one parallel is we are pushing up market as well. Like we're not we are still providing great experiences for our early growth stage startup customers, but we want late growth stage category leaders,
Yep.
mid-market enterprise. Like we're targeting deal size between 1 and 10 million ARR because if we can make that a repeatable motion, then I ultimately am going to hit the revenue targets that I want to see for the company. And that's, we're going to be able to provide a lot more valuable for everybody associated with the company at that level of scale. So that's something that, if we can crack that code, right? Like that's really what we need to do, like opposed to growing like very small and incrementally, which is also good, right? We're
Yep.
still doing that, but we want more of those big businesses. Like for us, it's companies like borrow recruiters from us. We want the projects where we're assigning 10, 20, 30 recruiters to a company. I mean, that's really what we're after right now. And so we're starting to see some success with larger projects, but we're still building out repeatability around that, and we want to like take it to the next level, right? Like we want to 10x our biggest deal we've ever signed, right? And how do we land that business is really like the question and the process and the strategies we're trying to like think through right now.
So how are you thinking about that on your side? You've landed some of these. Your deal size is much bigger, right, on your end. But how do you think about that when you think about your next 100 customers or getting to 100 million?
Yeah, I mean, so the kind of approach that I've been taking is I like our pretty much our whole internal leadership team that's full time is like pushing up, right? Like they have a strong foundation and they're kind of moving into their VP role for the first time, and we're, because I want that scrappiness, right? I want people to be able to work with, be resourceful and kind of push up, and it's strategic, but it's also just a lot of hard work, right? And so
Right.
we don't want to bring in executives that they're really smart and they know what to do, but they need a team of 10 people underneath them to actually execute on that. Like that's just not what we need. So like my strategy has been like getting those like up and comers, the scrappy people that are pushing up and fighting and willing to put in the work, and then having like a really robust advisory team of people that are very senior, have seen several successful exits, have been through scale, that are helping us guide strategy, right, at a high level, that have been through and been through this stuff and can help us avoid the problems. So like I'm getting, I invest a lot in advisors. Like that's one of the best, tools that I have to help us scale. Like I have a really amazing revenue advisor. I have a really amazing advisor that is in the RPO space that built and sold an RPO. I have, we're going to be bringing on a customer success delivery advisor that recently has overseen the build out of a over 100-person services company and has a SaaS background prior to that. So we're getting these specialists in place to help us, like, one, okay, enterprise sales, let's build process around that. Two, how do we optimize SMB sales and accelerate that funnel, right?
Yeah.
Three, how do we make sure we don't hit a bottleneck with delivery, so we know proactively when we have to promote people in management layers and stuff like that. Four, start to think about performance management at scale. Like we're doing a lot about that. And then it's just a motion of like just trying to stay ahead by like one step. I don't try to look in the future beyond that, but I try to think about like what are the problems I have today, and potentially what do I have tomorrow, and just that motion. But yeah, I think what's really, when we're going to take off and explode, is when we start landing like mid 7-figure, 8-figure deals. Like it will continue to grow, but when we start to dominate is when we figure that out. And there's someone I'm speaking to, like another advisor, that she might actually come on as like like a full-time employee, and her background is in this space for 15, 20 years, a few successful exits, and she's like hands-on enterprise sales, like the big stuff. Like she doesn't want to help it. She doesn't want to deal with like the 100K to 300K. Like she's like, no, I'm not going after that stuff. I'm just focusing on like enterprise Fortune 500, mid 7-8 figure deals. Like that's what she's going to be focusing on. So right now I'm working on, do I have the margin to bring her on, right? Like trying to figure out how do I make that happen, and when's the right time to do that, because obviously there's a lot of uncertainty. How aggressive do I want to be? Do I want to make that hire now? Do I want to wait a few months to see kind of like what happens in the market? So a lot of what I deal with too when it comes to scale is like trying to think about timing. Like when's the right time to make strategic decisions, strategic hires? Like what should my margin look like at scale? Because I have to be profitable as bootstrap. So it's like, how fast do I need to increase my cash balances to, like, and what correlation should the cash balance be to our expenses? And like, when's the right time to make certain strategic hires, and then calling your shot, right? Like how confident am I that this is going to be a huge growth lever if we make this big investment? So more and more I feel like my job's getting about like judgment when it comes to timing and really being able to call my shot on like which growth levers are my most confident in are going to hit, and just
Yep.
trying to not like fuck up, quite honestly. Like I just try not to make any mistakes that could kill us, right? So I really try to bring in the advisors and try to get everybody's thoughts on where are the biggest opportunities to explode, right? In a good way, a good explosion, a positive explosion that increases revenue,
So,
right?
so it's interesting. You have it. You think through it that way. So for me, I don't have a shortage of advisors, um, but I always have a shortage of like cash for all the things I want to do, right? And I think anybody does, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about decisions. And probably the most impactful thing, or one of the most impactful thing, is securing and testing. I went through a couple iterations of this. A finance lead, right, who ultimately right now is my CFO, and I think we talked about this a little bit, who gave me the confidence to hire a heavy hitter who also happened to be an advisor, friend, so forth, the VP of sales, that I will say like really change the game, right? In terms of a couple of different things. Now, a couple of things to think about are when you hire a sales leader, think about the immediate impact you want versus today versus what you want, for the future of the company. And the reason I say that is we built a foundation which allowed us to take a step back versus sell, 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 because we're both enterprise people that can sell. But he built a foundation, built camaraderie with this team around us, and we came together that gave me and this team the confidence to 5x this thing, right? More than if we just got 3 or 4 deals. So that's something to think about when you think about timing, is making sure you have the foundation to bring in those enterprise deals, not just that one, but how do you bring the second one? How do you bring that third? How do you bring the fourth, right? And it took somebody and a couple of people to think about it differently, not just one person, right? And that was an investment in not just dollars, it was an emotional investment on me to say, I need to like step back to say, it's okay if we miss a little bit on this revenue target that I'm very,
I
very
can
like,
tell that how
I don't
tempted.
miss revenue targets, right?
Right.
Because I'm bootstrapped. So I don't miss ever revenue targets. And I'm, and so forth. But we're so much better for it. So I think those are the things that, I think about, but I think finance sales go really hand in hand. And that even gave me bigger confidence in invest in product, which, I'm testing out, and we've brought on a product lead right now, VP of product.
That's awesome. Yeah, yeah, having the right finance advisor, right? Whether it's like a CFO or just like a high level finance advisor or whatever it might be, is such a game changer. Like you can be so much more confident and quick to act when you have the right budgets and forecasts in place, and
Exactly.
you understand the finances on a whole other level. Like, yeah, whenever I have like a big spending decision to make now, I just immediately hit up my finance guy and I'm just like, all right, can we walk through this? Like what, and also like the best finance people are strategic. Like they go beyond numbers on the P&L, and they actually like they'll from past experience be able to say like, oh, here's typically how this ROI goes, or here's the holes you can fall in with this
Exactly.
type of investment, that type of thing.
Exactly. And for our stage, right? Like there were some things that need to be done, right? And things it was just the right fit, right? And it ended up being more than just a finance person, a great partner.
Mhm.
So to the business, and so it ultimately rounded out our team, which arguably is, I mean, we're in a spot where it ends up making decisions a lot better. So it rounds out what you think about is when you're thinking about that enterprise hire, I think there's a lot of things to think about, right? Which are, yeah, the market, all those things, but how is that person going to influence all those components in your existing team? Um, how is that going to affect 6 months from now, the team, 12 months from now, and, your next 10 deals should, when she brings them in. Um, because now that's what I'm thinking about. I know he's going to be successful, um, but the team that he builds, what's that going to look like? Is
Right.
resources.
Yeah. That's where it's like, yeah, having that advisory layer. So there's like an extra set of
Yep.
eyes,
Yep.
you
Yep.
know? Well, hey man, look, this is great. Like I could keep going, but we're up on time here. And so I just wanted to say, thank you for coming on. This has been incredibly valuable. I appreciate your contribution. And I know founder CEOs tuning in, venture capitalists, everybody, product, GTM people are going to learn a lot from this conversation. So thank you for sharing your thoughts, your perspective, your experience with us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, and it's always great chatting with you. I'll see you on the other side, hopefully next time live in the next event, and have an awesome Friday.
Let's do it. Real quick though, before we jump off, could you tell everybody where to find you if they want to engage with your company or with you directly?
Absolutely. So I am at you can find me on LinkedIn, Sasanka Atapattu. And you can reach me at Sasanka Sasanka at launchsource.com. Or our website is launchsource.com. So
Love it.
simple. So thanks so much.
Yeah, for sure. And for everybody tuning in, thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.